Good evening and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Tuesday night, November 26th, year of our Lord 2024. Thanksgiving in a couple of days, but the college football playoff rankings just dropped. We had to wait till the end of the freaking Memphis-Michigan State game in the Maui Invitational to get there. Before I get into the show, just kind of a little bit of a rant there. ESPN, what are we doing? This is like the second time so far that the ranking show has been in between college basketball games. I'm a big college basketball fan. I like college basketball a lot. Not in freaking November. Should not have that scheduled in between November. ESPN, hopefully we can get some other partners in this college football playoff so it's not just ESPN and they can kind of do whatever they want and schedule however they want and kind of run and keep everybody at hold and do whatever they want. Hopefully some other partners get into that. TNT got into it this year for at least some of the games, but that was just a little bit of a rant there. It was just ridiculous that you had to wait for the end of the Maui Invitational college basketball game in fucking November to get to the college football playoff rankings, but the college football playoff rankings have dropped. I'll get to that in a second here, but before I do, always want to say, if you like the video version of the show, please like and subscribe right down here on YouTube. Leave a comment with what you felt about the rankings and other things that I talk about on the show tonight. And then if you prefer the audio version, it is available on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Under Sports Talk on a Budget, go like all the socials are out there under Sports Talk on a Budget or under my name, Cody Dodier, as well. So that is just if you have a chance, like, subscribe to anywhere you can for the show. I'd really appreciate it. But let's go ahead and look at our topics of the show. And the first topic of the show is going to be my college football playoff reaction, rankings reaction. Going to break down what the current bracket is and go over like the top, what the seeds are and who's playing who right now. Obviously, this is all subject to change. Still, the final week of the regular season coming this weekend, and then the conference championship weekend next weekend. So a lot can change, just like we saw this past weekend with all the carnage that happened on Saturday this past weekend. Second topic of the day is going to go to the NFL, and I want to talk about Saquon Barkley, who I think is the MVP right now. And then we're going to talk about the dumpster fires teams that reside in New York in both the Jets and the Giants. And then I'll go ahead and finish off my show with my Week 14, yes, last week of the regular season, college football picks, and my Week 13 NFL picks. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show. So as I mentioned, we had to wait around about half an hour almost for the fucking Michigan State and Memphis game to end so we can actually see the rankings. Thanks a lot, ESPN. Be better, but they don't really care because they actually would rather hold you hostage. It's not an ESPN rant here. They bug me with a lot of their coverage on things. College football is probably one of the better sports they actually cover, in my opinion, but not a rant there. But rankings just dropped, and I wanted to go over what the bracket would be. So our top four seeds, so our top four conference champions go as number one is Oregon, no change there. Number two is Texas, who presumably right now would be the SEC champion. Number three is Miami, who would presumably be the ACC champion. And number four is Boise State again. So we have another rankings where the group of five team in Boise State would get that bye over a Power Four conference in the Big 12. So Boise State is your fourth team. I know your seeded four team who would get the bye because of the fourth highest ranked conference champion right now, presumably being the conference champion in the Mountain West. And then we have the 5-12 matchup. Currently right now at number 5 is Ohio State, and they would host Arizona State in the shoe in Columbus. Arizona State would be your fifth and final automatic bid for a conference champion coming out of the Big 12. The 6-11 matchup is Penn State hosting Indiana. So that's a Big 10 game. These two did not play in the regular season, so this would be their first matchup. Played in the past, Penn State owns that series just like most Big 10 teams do against Indiana. That would be a pretty interesting game because everybody's talked about Indiana's strength of schedule and who has Indiana played and who has Indiana beaten. But really, who has Penn State really beaten? So that's a question there. No one's talking about their strength of schedule, their teams that they've beaten. They don't have a great resume. Their best win is probably at USC or Illinois at home, or maybe even last weekend on the road at Minnesota. So not great wins right now for Penn State. That would be an interesting game. The 7-10 matchup as it stands right now would be Notre Dame hosting SMU. I like this game a lot. SMU is a team that seems to get better each and every week throughout the season. One of the best teams, and I think should be the favorite to win the ACC. They're just not right now, or at least not ranked right now to that. And then Notre Dame, a team that has, after that loss to Northern Illinois, has really kind of righted the ship and been one of the most dominant teams in the country. Now, their schedule hasn't been great. They haven't played a lot of tough teams. They finish out with USC on the road. That could be interesting because USC is a team that plays in a fashion that Notre Dame hasn't really played this year, so that'll be interesting. I'll get into that a little bit later when I get into my picks for college football. And then we have the 8-9 matchup, and that would be Georgia hosting Tennessee. Now, of course, we've seen this game already. We saw it 2 weeks ago. And Tennessee went into Georgia, took an early 10-0 lead, and then Georgia basically did the rest of the scoring for the rest of the night. I think outscored them 31-7 on the way to a victory at home. So we've seen this game before. I do believe if this was kind of the scenario in 2 weeks, I think the committee would probably move things around, maybe move Notre Dame to 8 and Georgia to 7, and have Tennessee go to Notre Dame or SMU go to Georgia, something like that. I think they would move it around a little bit so you don't get a rematch. But as of right now, that would be the matchups in the first round and the teams that have the bye. So that is the bracket right now for the college football playoff. The next two teams on the outside looking in, actually ranked 12th and 13 in the poll, are Clemson and Alabama. Alabama dropped 6 spots after their loss on the road to Oklahoma. I didn't think that was far enough, to be honest. You score 3 points against an Oklahoma team that already had 5 losses, including blowout losses to teams like to teams like South Carolina, teams like Texas, teams like Tennessee. This Oklahoma team hadn't looked like a competent offense, decent defense, but not a confident offense and not a competent, complete team throughout the season, and you lose 24-3. You can't even score a touchdown when there's other teams in this conference that were putting 30 plus on this Oklahoma team. I thought Alabama should have dropped further. Not surprised that they didn't. They're Alabama. They seem to be the darling every year. Even when Nick Saban isn't there, they seem to be the darling. So those are the two teams on the outside looking in. Clemson plays South Carolina, who is currently ranked 14th in the poll, 15th in the polls. That'll be an interesting game because the question there, so it's going to be 15-12 matchup. It's on the road in Clemson, so South Carolina has to travel to Clemson. So interesting matchup there. If South Carolina could win that game, can they hoist themselves up to be one of those first teams out and maybe potentially have a playoff bid if someone else stumbles? If Clemson wins that game, is their resume good enough, and are they good enough to get a playoff spot sitting as that first team out? Just wanted to kind of look at those first teams out and some of the matchups here for the weekend. But just to look back at this bracket, I actually don't have many issues with this bracket. I think that the rankings and the seedings are accurate as we sit right now. Now, of course, Ohio State can beat Oregon. They'd probably be the number 1 overall seed. Georgia could beat Texas if Texas beats Texas A&M in the SEC championship. That would probably make Georgia like the 2 or 3 seed at the lowest at that point. So like I said, going into this, these are kind of subject to change. I really doubt that it's just going to stay chalk like this for the next 2 weeks, especially with the season we've had in college football. Tennessee could lose to Vanderbilt. Georgia could lose to Georgia Tech. Don't see that happening, but it could. Indiana probably won't lose to Purdue, but you can't guarantee anything in this league right now, in college football right now, this year. The arguments we were hearing last week that I covered was, the SEC needs to get 5 teams, maybe 6 teams. Now it's looking like 3 may be the max for the SEC unless there isn't some chaos this final weekend here, because I think the conference championship chaos isn't really going to hold a lot of weight because a lot of those teams are already at least in the bigger conferences. But this weekend is the chaos that the SEC would need to get their teams back in. I don't see it happening, and I think that kind of could be the ceiling is 3 teams unless Texas A&M can beat Texas and win the SEC championship game. Then you could see maybe 4 teams getting in from the SEC. But still, like I said, no problem with the rankings. Not a huge reaction. Just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit here. I thought the committee did a good job. Indiana deserved to still be in there after the carnage that happened after their game with Ole Miss, Alabama, even A&M losing, Colorado losing, BYU losing. All these teams that lost behind them kept Indiana still in there. Indiana, I believe, deserves to be in there if they can win against Purdue, and I fully expect them to win against Purdue. Purdue's one of the worst teams in the Power 4 conferences right now, so I fully expect them to win, and I think they'll be just fine. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend, if there is any more carnage or if it kind of just stays status quo as well. that's kind of been just my college football playoff reaction there. Like I said, the teams on the outside looking in. Now you got some scenarios this weekend with the Big 12 is a lot of different scenarios. There's like 9 different scenarios and tiebreakers you can look at. The teams that are actually in the driver's seat in the Big 12 are Arizona State, who's currently sitting at the top of the Big 12, and Iowa State. If they both win, they are probably, I believe, they're in to play in the Big 12 championship game. The ACC is basically set almost as long as Miami can take care of business against Syracuse. SMU is already there, and they're awaiting if Miami can win. Clemson would get in whether they win or lose against South Carolina because that's a non-conference game. And then in the SEC, Georgia is already there because their last game of the season is against Georgia Tech. That's a non-conference game. The winner of Texas and Texas A&M would get into the to the SEC championship game and play Georgia for the SEC title. And then in the Big Ten, Oregon has already clinched the spot there. Ohio State just needs a victory against Michigan. If Ohio State were to fall, which would be a disaster scenario for Ohio State losing 4 years in a row to Michigan, especially this year's Michigan team, if Indiana beats Purdue, Indiana would be in the Big Ten title game. If Indiana somehow loses to Purdue and Ohio State loses to Michigan, Penn State would go to the Big Ten championship game. So those are kind of the clinching scenarios there. Something else to look out for is Tulane. Tulane, I believe, was ranked at 19 or 17. No, they were ranked at 17. That was kind of something I was looking forward to in this rankings, where they would be ranked in connection with Arizona State, because there still is an opportunity. Tulane plays a very good Memphis team this weekend on Thanksgiving, who's a 9-2 Memphis team. That's a good win. Then they play an Army team who I believe is still ranked, or was ranked in the here, let me double check that. I believe they were still ranked, but let me double check that real quick and see if Army was ranked and if that would be a ranked victory in the American Championship. Let's see here. Stupid Fox. Army was not ranked, so Army falls out of the rankings. So even if that's who they're playing now, they could get back into the rankings with maybe some more carnage this weekend, especially at the back end there. So Army could get back in. That would be a huge feather in Tulane's cap if Army could be ranked when they play each other in the American Championship. And if some more carnage happens like it's happened all year in the Big 12 and teams start to slide down, does Tulane go up high enough to get that 5th conference championship bid and leave a Power 4 conference like the Big 12 out entirely? That is something that is possible. It's not really plausible, but it is possible and something to look out for. That's why I wanted to see exactly where Tulane and Arizona State were. They moved Arizona State above Tulane because Tulane was idle last week, and Arizona State had a ranked win at home against BYU. So that was what they were supposed to do, but it wasn't a guarantee, so that was an interesting thing I wanted to see there. But like I said, no real issues with the rankings tonight. I thought the committee did a good job. A lot of carnage last weekend, so there was an interesting way to do it. Would like Alabama and Ole Miss to fall a little bit further back because they have a couple bad losses on the season now, but still no real issue. I think if things hold serve, we won't see either of those teams in the playoff. And in my opinion, both of those teams don't deserve to be in the playoff at this point. But let's go ahead and move to our second topic, and that is going to be in the NFL. And I wanted to talk about a player who I believe is the MVP in the league right now, and that is Saquon Barkley. I believe he's the NFL MVP right now. Not only has he changed that team in Philly, I feel like he's changed their culture. Philadelphia was a team last year that had that epic collapse after starting 10-1, losing 6 of their last 7 games down the stretch, or 5 of their last 6 games down the stretch, getting hammered in the first round of the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were looking for help, and they were looking for a culture shift, and they got one in Saquon Barkley. He leads the league in rushing. He's 70 yards ahead of Derrick Henry, who is number 2. He's already got a career high in rushing, and we still have 6 more games to go for him. So that's a huge thing to look at there. And Saquon Barkley, he's had I know MVP moments aren't like Heisman moments in college football. You don't have MVP moments that people remember, but he's had MVP moments. The 270-yard touchdown runs on Sunday night, the jumping backwards over a guy a couple weeks ago against, I think it was the Jaguars. He's had his MVP moments. He's been one of the most dominant players in all of the NFL right now. And right now, outside of Josh Allen, I don't know of a quarterback, because the MVP has, of course, become a quarterback award in the NFL. I don't know of a quarterback that really deserves to be in that conversation as high as Saquon Barkley. Lamar Jackson was there a couple weeks ago, had a bad game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and had just a pretty good game last night against the LA Chargers. But right now, I think it's Saquon Barkley's award to lose. Now, like I said, it is a quarterback award at this point, so Josh Allen, I think, is the guy who can get back in there and take it from him. But if Saquon Barkley continues what he's doing and the Eagles continue winning on the back of his performance on the offensive end, I like Saquon Barkley a lot to win the MVP. And the other NFL topic I wanted to touch on is the New York teams and the absolute dumpster fires both the New York teams are. We're going to start with the Giants. Of course, last week they started the week off by benching Daniel Jones, and then a couple days later they decided to cut him. He kind of requested to be cut. They made him third string. I'll get into that in a minute. He kind of requested to be cut. They cut him. But here is kind of the football malpractice, in my opinion, that the Giants did. Instead of going to Drew Lock, who's a proven backup and a guy who's actually had some decent success in the league, they decided to overpass Drew Lock, who is the backup on the depth chart for the New York Giants, and go to the third-string quarterback in Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, to try to get some publicity for the team, try to get some fans to be excited, because we all remember Tommy Cutlets from last year with the Italian stuff. It was great seeing it last year, although a couple of those wins that he got last year might have cost them Jaden Daniels or Drake May. That's a conversation for another day, but still, the Giants decide to overpass their backup quarterback, who has proven that he could play in the NFL, for a guy who is more of just a publicity stunt and not a real NFL quarterback. Tommy DeVito seems like a nice guy, nice story, nice family. He's not an NFL quarterback. He could play well every now and then. He is not an NFL quarterback. And like I said, that is basically football malpractice to do that. And you could tell in the game on Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they looked like they had quit. And I think when you do that, now, benching Daniel Jones, I have no issue with. He has been awful. They never should have paid him last year. They never should have chose him over Saquon Barkley. The Giants have made a lot of mistakes as an organization in the last couple of years, and Daniel Jones is one of them. So benching Daniel Jones, I have no problem with. He has been bad this year, and he is not the starting quarterback at this point in his career in the NFL. Maybe he can revive his career like Sam Darnold and start in a couple of years, but at this point in the NFL, he is a backup at best. But you can't overpass your backup quarterback. The guys in the locker room know the hierarchy. They know that Daniel Jones, to start the season, was the best quarterback on the roster. They know that Drew Lock was the second best quarterback on the roster, and they know that Tommy DeVito was at best the third best quarterback on the roster. They look like they quit. That team looked like they quit on that organization and on Brian Daboll. That team looked like they quit. They got steamrolled by a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that has a ton of injuries and is super banged up. They didn't even look like they belonged on the same field. They didn't even look like they wanted to be on the same field. So that was an embarrassment for a franchise that has 4 Super Bowl wins, two Super Bowl wins in this century, a proud franchise, one of the flagship franchises of the NFL is the New York Giants, and that was an embarrassing showcase they put on Sunday after the embarrassing moves they made last week of overpassing Drew Lock to go to Tommy DeVito to try to drag up some publicity, and it just backfired on you big time. But take solace in this, Giants fans and New York Giants, you're still not the biggest dumpster fire in New York, because doesn't matter what you do as when you're the Giants, you'll never be as big of a dumpster fire as the New York Jets. New York Jets last week fired GM Joe Douglas after about 4 weeks ago when they fired Robert Saleh. Another disappointing season. All the hype that they came into the season with, I didn't believe it for a second, and it didn't come to fruition. And now there's rumors coming out that Woody Johnson, the owner, wanted to bench Aaron Rodgers after their Week 4 loss to Denver. There's rumors that Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to do MRIs, that he's declining MRIs from the team because he doesn't want to show that he's injured, doesn't trust the team. There's a lot of rumors coming out of the Jets building, and in true Jets fashion, they're not good. They're not good. They're an absolute joke, absolute dumpster fire. Anybody that really thought that they could turn their fortunes around as a franchise with a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury was just mind-boggling to me. And there's guys and personalities and TV personalities that I respect that I think really know what they're talking about that were saying that in the offseason, and I just couldn't understand it. This is the New York freaking Jets. This is Aaron Rodgers. He wasn't even good his last year in Green Bay in 2022. Now he's a year removed from that with an Achilles injury. Didn't believe it for a second. Looks like what I said. Now I'm wrong a lot, but I was 100% right on this opinion. And the New York Jets are saving the Giants from even worse humiliation and embarrassment because they're a bigger dumpster fire. So, New York football fans, maybe you just need to go to Western New York and be Buffalo Bills fans because the teams in the big city in New York are not good. And their fortunes aren't looking great, so they may not be good for a while. So just wanted to kind of touch on that. Just another storyline coming out of New York football. It is not good right now. And like I said, these teams, I don't know how bright their future is. But let's go ahead and finish off the show here with my Week 13 college football picks. Week 14 college football picks, the last week in the regular season, and my Week 13 NFL picks. We're starting off in college football. And in my opinion, the best or biggest game of the weekend is, at this point, it is here. Let me look at this again. So I did the rankings earlier, so I got to see what the rankings are now. Let's see here. So we have number 15, South Carolina. At number 12, Clemson. Clemson is a 2.5-point favorite in this game. I like South Carolina a lot, what they're doing right now. I really like how they're playing. Lenore Sellers, their quarterback, seems to get better week after week after week. Their freshman quarterback. And their defensive line has NFL players on it, both on the interior and on the edge. They have NFL players on their defensive line. They're a really solid team, and they're getting better and better each week. Well, this Clemson team, listen, you can argue, and I would argue this, the two best teams Clemson played this year, Georgia to start the season and Louisville 3 weeks ago, both those teams boat raced Clemson. So Clemson is sitting at 12 right now, a little bit overranked because the rest of their schedule isn't great. They have one win over a bowl-eligible team. One win. They would get their second if they were able to beat South Carolina this weekend. I don't think that happens. I like South Carolina to win, so give me South Carolina plus 2.5, and I would love South Carolina money line as well. And then we have the game. The big game, the game that has been one of the biggest games in the country the last 3 years. Not quite the case this year, but that is Michigan at number 2, Ohio State. Ohio State is currently a 21-point favorite in this game. Now, we all know the history of these last 3 years. Michigan has won this game the last 3 years, won the Big Ten, went to the playoffs the last 3 years. Ohio State is the clear better team right now. Now, Michigan has gotten better these last couple of weeks to finish off the year, and they've got themselves bowl eligible. But Ohio State is really peaking right now at the right time. I kind of questioned their offensive line last week, but they looked pretty good against a pretty stout defensive front in Indiana. They're running the ball better with their two-headed monster. Will Howard is playing with a lot of confidence. And how could you not when you have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka, two of the best wide receivers in the country to throw to? So this Ohio State team, I think it's an absolute mismatch. The only way I could see this game being close with Michigan and Ohio State is if Michigan can get after the quarterback and maybe expose those offensive line issues for Ohio State that Indiana wasn't. That is the only path, in my opinion, for Michigan to keep it close. I don't think there's a path to victory at all for Michigan, but I do think they keep it closer than the experts think. So give me Michigan plus 21. Ohio State wins, Michigan covers, but if Ohio State gets the opportunity, I think they will run the score up if they get the opportunity. So that spread could not even matter by the time we get to the late third, fourth quarter, because I think Ohio State would run up the score if they get the opportunity. Another big rivalry game that was thought to be bigger at the beginning of the season has kind of lost its luster, and that is number 5 Notre Dame at USC. And Notre Dame is currently a 6.5-point favorite in this game. Notre Dame is a team, like I said, they've won 9 straight games since losing in week 2 to Northern Illinois. They really haven't played great teams, though. The best team they've played in that stretch is Louisville, and they beat them by 7, and that was a tight game. Georgia Tech was probably the next best team. Navy and Army were ranked, but they were overranked. They were just undefeated, and the committee and the AP didn't really know what to do with them, so they ranked them, but they weren't a top 25 team to most people. So even though you got 2 ranked wins against Army and Navy, and then another one against Louisville, I don't really hold those very high, and none of those teams are currently ranked right now. So that goes to show you what kind of teams those teams ended up being versus who they were when Notre Dame played them. And Notre Dame hasn't played an offense outside of Louisville that actually throws the ball consistently well. And they will play that this Saturday against USC. And USC, I know they're not having a great year, of course. I'm a USC fan. I know all about it. And my neighbors probably do too, because they probably heard me yelling on Saturdays as well. So, but what USC has done, they have played each opponent that they've played to a tight game. Whether it was LSU in the opener, Michigan in the Big House, Penn State at home, Washington on the road. They have played every single team, and Penn State and LSU, I would argue, are just as good, if not better, than Notre Dame. They've played every single team to a tight game, so I think they cover this spread. As a USC fan, I would love the money line just for fun, but I think they cover the spread, so give me USC plus 6.5 to keep it close. Notre Dame probably gets the victory and goes off to the playoff, but I think USC keeps it close. And then maybe the biggest game on actually of the weekend outside of South Carolina and Clemson, and that is Texas at number 3. Texas at, let's see here, we're Texas number 20, Texas A&M, and Texas is currently a 5.5-point favorite. Now, this is one of the historic rivalries that we lost for basically a decade and a half when Texas A&M decided to leave the Big 12 and join the SEC. It is finally back, and I think it's going to be absolutely phenomenal scene there. It's in Kyle Field in College Station. Huge home field advantage there for Texas A&M. Texas A&M is coming off of a loss at Auburn, but they're SEC championship hopes are still alive. They win this game, they go to the SEC championship game. They win that game, they're in the playoff. So still a lot to play for Texas A&M, and it's a rivalry game, so a lot to play for there as well. Question mark for Texas A&M with me is, who are they offensively? I feel like they want to pass the ball a little bit with Marcel Reed, but they want to be a running team. They're running their main running back that they've had most of the year is out, so that's hurt them too. Who are they offensively? Are we just going to be a ground and pound team with Marcel Reed running the ball and the backs running the ball, or do we want to throw the football? So that's a big question mark there. And then Texas offensively has kind of been a little anemic recently. They were not great 2 weeks ago against Arkansas. They were okay last week against a Kentucky team that looks to kind of punted on the season. So what is Texas offensively? This could be a defensive game, so I don't know what the over-under is, to be honest, but I would probably look at the under in this game because that could be definitely a play there because I think it's going to be a lower-scoring game than what the experts think. I think Texas A&M keeps this game close enough. Rivalry, still got a chance to win the SEC and get in the SEC championship game. And Texas, like I said, their offense is just kind of sputtering around right now. Quinn Ewers looks to be banged up still. So I think Texas A&M covers. Give me Texas A&M plus 5.5. I think Texas ultimately wins the game, though. And then we'll finish up with the game in the Big 12, and that is number 24 Kansas State at number 18 Iowa State. And Iowa State basically controls their own destiny to get into the Big 12 championship game. They win, and they're in that game. So Iowa State's a 3-point favorite in this game. Iowa State kind of sputtered a little bit last week against Utah, but was able to get a good drive at the end of the game with Rocco Becht and get a victory there in a tough place to play in Rice-Eccles Stadium. Kansas State has been kind of a weird team. And some weeks they look like the best team in the Big 12, and some weeks they look like the middle of the pack team that they are in the Big 12. So they've been an up-and-down team. Don't know really how to kind of gauge their season. Avery Johnson, I was never a huge fan of. He just doesn't throw the ball well enough consistently. I think Iowa State wins this game. They have all that to play for in front of them to get to the Big 12 championship game and an opportunity to get into the playoff, most likely. So I think Iowa State wins. I think Iowa State covers. Like what Rocco Becht is doing, he keeps getting better throughout the season as well. So those are my college football picks. Let's go ahead and finish off with my NFL picks. And we're going to start with the night game on Thanksgiving on Thursday night. And we have the Dolphins at the Packers, and the Packers are a 3.5-point favorite. Now, the temperature is supposed to be cold. It's supposed to be under 45 degrees. And the question and the thing is there, when the temp gets under 45 degrees, Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins quarterback, of course, is not good. He loses. So that's a big question mark there. The Dolphins are playing really well with the loss to the Chargers last night. Their playoff hopes are still alive. They still have an opportunity to get into a wild card. The division is probably lost, but the wild card is still open. So the Dolphins are still have a lot to be playing for. They're looking really good. They hammered my Patriots last week. They're looking really good this right now. The Packers, not a great effort against a kind of banged up, short-handed 49ers team, but you're able to put them away, and they become a real ground and pound team with Josh Jacobs, and you still have a ton of weapons on the outside with Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, Reed, Musgrave. The list goes on and on. So still a ton of talent. Jordan Love, I don't know if he is actually 100% right now, but still a ton of talent on this team. I like the Packers at home. I think the elements and the weather will play a factor like it always has with Tua Tagovailoa. So give me the Packers to win and cover. The Packers win and cover -3.5 is the play there. Then we have the Steelers at the Bengals, and the Bengals are currently a 3-point favorite in this game. Now, the Steelers are coming off just a rough loss in the snow at Cleveland last Thursday night. They get kind of a mini bye. The Bengals are actually coming off a bye in a tough loss 2 weeks ago on a Sunday night to the Chargers. I love the Bengals offense. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown is getting better. T. Higgins is back and doing well. Mike Gesicki is really playing a role as well. But their defense is just awful. Their defense is just awful, so that's why I think the Steelers will cover and probably find a way to win this game. Russell Wilson has struggled the last 2 weeks. I think he has a better week against this poor Cincinnati Bengals defense. Give me the Steelers to cover. Steelers +3 is the play there for me. And then we have the Chargers at the Falcons. The Falcons are coming off a bye, and the Chargers, of course, are coming off a short week and a loss last night to the Baltimore Ravens. But the Falcons are not just coming off a bye. They're coming off of back-to-back losses and an absolute boat race loss on the road at Denver 2 weeks ago. And they're kind of sputtering, and Kirk Cousins is not playing well right now. Like, it's kind of the Michael Penix conversations have started a little bit, how bad Kirk Cousins has looked in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And this Chargers team, they can get after the quarterback, and Kirk Cousins was always never been a mobile guy, but now he's had that Achilles injury last year, and he's older, so he's basically just like a statue back there in the backfield. That doesn't bode well for the Falcons. I think the Chargers bounce back. They feast on inferior teams, and I think the Falcons are inferior to the Chargers as of right now. Chargers go on the road. They bounce back. They get the victory. Give me the Chargers to win and cover. Chargers -2 is the play there. And then we have the Cardinals at the Vikings, and the Vikings are quietly 9-2. They got that overtime victory after that crazy comeback against the Bears on the road on Sunday. And Sam Darnold hasn't turned into a pumpkin. He keeps on playing well. He keeps on proving that he always was a starting quarterback. That skill and that talent was always there. It just needed the right coaching to get it out of him, and it has gotten out of him all year. Cardinals had an awful showing on the road against the Seahawks. Now they have to go on the road again to the Minnesota Vikings. Don't love that spot there for them. So I think the Vikings win. I think the Vikings cover. One of the quietest 9-2 teams maybe ever. They're keeping. So the Lions have to keep winning because they're only one game back of the Lions, the Vikings are. So that is an interesting storyline there as well. And then we'll go ahead and finish out. I believe this is the Monday night game, and that is the Eagles at the Ravens, or Sunday night is the Sunday night game. That is the Eagles at the Ravens, and the Ravens are a 3-point favorite in this game. Ravens are coming off a short week, cross-country travel to L.A., and they have to travel back. Now they get a home game, but they're playing one of the hottest teams in the league in the Philadelphia Eagles. Already talked about it with I think is the MVP right now, and Saquon Barkley. Talked about that earlier. Jalen Hurts is playing really well. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are doing their thing. But something that's gone underrated with this Eagles team is the defense. And they're young and they're good. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis up front are kicking ass. You got Nakobe Dean. You got Nolan Smith. You got Reed Blankenship. You got Cooper DeJean, the rookie as well. Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie that they got out Toledo in the first round at corner, is playing really well also. This Eagles team is just super hot right now. This Ravens team, I'm still not sold on. I think their defense has gotten better, but I still don't think it's great. Short week, get a tough matchup at home against the Eagles. I think the Eagles could win this game. I definitely think they cover, so give me the Eagles +3 in this game. So those are my picks, both in college football and the NFL. Remember, it's the last week of the regular season in college football and Thanksgiving week, of course, for the NFL. So we got 3 games on Thanksgiving, a decent slate outside of that middle game between the Cowboys and Giants. But either way, that has been my show today. This is Sports Talk on a Budget. Please like and subscribe to the video version if you prefer that on YouTube, just right here. Leave a comment with some of your picks, some of your reaction to the playoff as well, the playoff rankings. And then if you prefer the audio version, please like and subscribe at whatever you listen to under Sports Talk on a Budget. Thank you again for watching and listening, and have a great day.